Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Creation Myths. As I always do, first thing I got to do is just make sure everything looks and sounds okay on YouTube. So once I see stuff and I hear it, then we can move on. Okay, it looks okay on my end, but I always have to check, chat, you know the deal. If there's any audio or video problems, you let me know. I will see your comments. So, really excited for tonight's show. I'm so excited to have Dr. Jay Bundy here, evolutionary biologist and alum of the Lenski long-term evolution experiment. So I'm really
Yes.
excited for this conversation because Jay had a debate with Dr. Michael Behe back in July, and we are going to talk about that debate because folks, let me tell you, I have never seen Michael Behe stuffed in a locker like what happened in that debate. I've never seen it, and it was glorious. So, for those of you who don't know Jay, his channel, Pocket Locker 86, it's linked down below in the description. Hit that, hit subscribe, go check it out. Jay does great work. So, Jay, if you want to add anything to the introduction, take a
No, that's
minute.
perfect. That's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah.
So, thank you for being here. We've been trying to set some things up for a while, and the scheduling is always hard. And just before we
Yeah.
came on
I'm a
air,
new assistant
everybody,
professor and you're a
you're
experienced professor.
well, you said you're a new assistant professor now. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's really
Thank
great.
you.
Are you at? I see you got the thing. Are you at Penn State?
No.
No,
I'm at Seton Hall.
you're at Seton. You're at Seton
Yeah.
Hall.
Yeah.
You, I'm like an hour south of you.
Oh, we gotta link up.
We
Yeah.
gotta, we gotta. All right, that's awesome. All right, we'll talk off the air.
Yeah.
But that's great. You're in Seton Hall now.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right,
Yeah.
we'll talk later. We'll talk later. All
All
right.
right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what we are here to do tonight is talk about this debate that Jay had with Dr. Michael Behe, intelligent design creationist, irreducible complexity
Irreducible
guy,
complexity. Yeah.
the guy, and star witness initially for the not the plaintiff. I always forget the terms. Not the plaintiff, the other one in the Dover
Yeah. The
intelligent
defendant.
design,
Yeah. Yeah.
in the Dover trial.
Yeah.
But his testimony was disastrous and basically won the
Disastrous.
trial for
For
the
the other
plaintiffs.
team. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So first, I just want to ask you how that debate came about because creationists tend to be like kind of cagey about
Yeah.
talking to like actual experts. So how did that
Yeah.
even happen?
Michael Beverly got it set up. So I don't know. He just came in the gather one day. He asked me if I wanted to do it, and I was like, I was a bit taken aback. Like, how did you get Michael B to be on your channel? And he's like, oh, I just asked him. Yeah, he's just willing to come on my channel. I was like, oh, okay. I was a bit nervous about doing it, to be honest, because I all those type of things. I'm like, I try to be sensitive about what I expose my community to and, what I participate in. And a lot of debates are kind of fruitless. Also, I think people don't realize that, like, um, unfortunately, our like colleagues don't really think too highly of it. They're not like, "Oh, you're debating a creationist? That's awesome. Here's a raise." Like, it doesn't really work
Yeah,
like
it
that. Like,
doesn't.
they're like, "What are you doing? Like, why would you talk to these people in public?"
Uh-huh.
Like, so it's so you're like, so it can get a little dicey. Um, but I like Michael Beverly a lot, and I also felt that Michael B. He kind of is legitimately an academic, who is the irreducible complexity guy. So he's not like just some random person. He's kind of, a central figure in the whole thing. And also, like, Rob Pennock, who was the star witness for the evolution side, is one of my mentors. So
Mhm.
I sort of felt like, and Rob doesn't like me doing any of these debates. He thinks they're a total waste of time. But he also understands like why I do them. And I kind of felt like not like a part of it, but I feel like in the sense that the way Behe just continues the same lies and the same stuff that was dealt with in Kitzmiller versus Dover, that like he's kind of, to me, disrespected the other people that were a part of that process. And actually, to be honest, I started to become a little bit committed to this thing that I think the fight's not over. I think that it was a mistake. I think that a lot of people make to think like, oh, evolution won the trials, and so evolution won, and that's the end of it. And so now I think that that's actually sort of a misguided take on the whole thing, because I think they've moved beyond that. They realized, oh, we can do private schooling, we can be all over the internet, we can do all these social media platforms, we can go for the school boards, and now they're basically trying to even claw back the public school curriculum because they're starting to feel themselves.
It's been right. We're like another 20 years in the cycle. So it's like, okay, here we go again, right?
Yeah.
There was just a thing, I think, in West Virginia and Louisiana, and I want to say Oklahoma. Like, it's coming up again, and it's, that game of whack-a-mole, just like it was 20 years ago. It's like, well, here we are again.
And it wasn't going to be like one of those things where it's like on some creationist channel or whatever. So I felt like I was going to get one shot at Michael Behe under favorable conditions.
Yeah.
Take it and
do it. Yeah.
That's it. Make the best of it. Yeah.
And so you said something really interesting about your colleagues. And one thing that I learned in grad school with this is, like, I would mention just like, oh, by the way, did you see what this guy from like Harvard, but he thinks the world is 6,000 years old, and to be like, what are you talking about? Like, no, I don't have no idea what people still do that. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And it's amazing the degree to which, like, in the field of evolution, just, you take like a random sampling of like a bunch of evolutionary biologists who are practicing. The majority of them don't know who, Michael Behe is, or Nathaniel Jeanson, or Rob Carter. Like, you name all these like credentialed creationists. And because, as you brought up multiple times during the debate, they're not even attempting to publish anything in real journals. They're not attempting to make the case like the way you convince people of things in science. People just don't know who they are. So it's a complete shock to a lot of the community that, like, this stuff is out there. But they're going on, who's the guy from Discovery Institute, Stephen Meyer? He was like on Joe Rogan recently. Like, they're going out there and making it seem like they're a thing, but it's all just window dressing. And I've come around on this of like, I don't think anybody should debate these guys. No, they're out there. It's better to like counter program, be in the room, than just let them have the floor to themselves. Because like the having a platform, they got the platform.
They got the platforms. And you're not platforming them. They're platforming us at this point, because they just have so much more financial support, audience capture, like access to resources and networks. So that's part of the scary thing too. And it is religiously motivated, and so there are just so many people who are just sort of faithful American Christians, and when the rubber meets the road, they're going to find something to grasp at to reinforce their faith, and these people are happy to be there, telling them what to think. So
and that actually, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in notes I made, because that actually leads into something really important that you said during the debate, where you took a second, you let go of Michael Behe for just a second to like step back and say, let's talk about Discovery Institute. And you characterize Discovery Institute as like this, they present themselves as science, but they're not doing science. They are a right-wing political interest group that mostly does lobbying. And then you did a really neat trick that I had never seen anyone do before, but I loved this moment. And for anyone who hasn't watched this debate, by the way, it's linked down below.
Oh, great. You got the
You
link.
should
Awesome. We're covered. We're
100%.
covered. Yeah.
Yeah. The debate is linked below, everybody, on Michael Beverly's
Yeah,
channel.
check it out. Check it
His
out.
channel is also linked, so you can subscribe to him. But everyone should check this out. There was this great moment where you said, let's go to Discovery Institute's homepage. Here are the things that are on there right now. And it was like all culture war stuff. It was like anti-trans stuff. And you were
Yeah.
like, does this sound like a science organization to you? No, this is just boilerplate right-wing culture war stuff.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
science is a facade. And that was such a neat trick, because here you have Behe trying to say, no, this is legit. This is all science. Okay, let's see what kind of things you're putting out into the world.
Yeah.
And it's just not that at all.
So I mentioned being nervous about doing it because I was concerned about platforming. And that's part of why, is because, I think Behe's a bad guy, and I think the Discovery Institute are bad people. And so that was very deliberate. Was like, if I'm going to do this debate, to be honest, I wanted it to be less about the argument of intelligent design or irreducible complexity, and really getting people to realize Michael Behe is a fraud, and the intelligent design, the Discovery Institute is a fraudulent organization. And unfortunately, like, I knew if I really did that, people would say I didn't address his argument, I didn't deal with the topic and all this stuff. So I knew I had to, like, make it feel like most of the meat and potatoes was I did deal with the argument, and I did thoroughly explain why it's not science. But the thing I told myself was, like, if I'm going to do this, then I have to do the other two. And so that was always part of the plan, was I'm going to talk about the Institute, and then I'm going to talk about him. And when it came to talking about the Institute, like, there's, people have done really good stories on the Discovery Institute. So I benefited from reading some of that. And that's kind of where I was getting the idea from. So the first thing was, like, the money. Most of their money goes to salaries. And, anybody that knows, like, works with grants works with grants or funding, external funding in any field, knows it's normal for a lot of the money of a grant to go to salary. Like, that's a reality. It's not, people have to eat and pay their bills. Right? Yeah. But it's very unusual for all of it to go to salaries. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at their stuff, like, by and large, all of their money goes to the fellows, and, like, it pays their salaries. And then the grants that they award are usually to fully funded subsidiaries. Like, so they're not really external organizations. They're, like, organizations that they've started, and then they just use those grants to pay another few salaries. Mm-hmm. And so they're normally with a granting organization like that, they would have to show, like, oh, we had to fund this. They needed equipment, they needed reagents, they needed lab techs, they needed incubators, they needed pipettes, they need actual stuff and materials to do research with, and they never produce any. And then they don't actually produce any scientific research. What they actually produce is recommendations for legislators, ad campaigns, the stuff that they write, but they don't actually produce any science. And so for them to say they're a scientific organization is literally a lie. They are not doing any science, and they are not producing any science. But that's how they classify themselves. I actually think, to be honest with you, I have really strong suspicions that they're a criminal organization, and that they are essentially being treated like a church and hiding behind their the fact that people know they're a religious organization, and they would claim that what they're doing is religious freedom or whatever. But I do think that it's fraudulent. I know fraud has a very special legal term, and that's different than, like, presenting your, but I do sincerely think they're a criminal organization. And actually, I've been motivated to go after them. If being an assistant professor wasn't killing me, I would in an alternate reality, I would love to go to law school and try to prosecute organizations that hide behind creationism, because I do think they're a criminal organization.
Yeah, there's a lot of in the kind of more kind of wider right wing think tank extended universe. You've got a lot of these, like, I forget the exact, I'm going to get it wrong, but like the 501c3, like public interest groups that are theoretically non-political, but then they're doing openly political activity.
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
like, in
Yeah.
order to be this thing, here are the things you can't do, but you're
Yes.
openly doing these things, like lobbying legislators for specific
Yes.
bills, for example. And
Yes.
it's like,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
not in the, and I don't know what
Yes.
types of groups are allowed to do, but
And
like there are
certainly you
rules
normally
for that.
can't do that as a scientific organization, right? Like, and then the other thing is, why say that? Like, that's kind of my next thing. And like, if they literally said we're a religious organization, and we register as a religious organization, and we're registered as a lobbying organization, I'd be like, okay, then whatever
Right.
little spin you're putting on it, then that's fine. But no, they literally put on their tax filings that they are a scientific organization that produces scientific research. Oh, okay. That's a
Yeah.
lie. You're
And then it's
lying on
like,
your tax forms. Like, what are we talking about here?
right.
Cha-ching, this is,
And what
yeah.
they would claim is it's in their journal, Biocomplexity, where, right, the reviewers are also
Are
all the
also
Discovery
them.
Institute fellows who are also all the authors and are also the editors. It's like
Yes,
it's all the
yes,
same people
yes,
doing every
yes.
role,
Yeah,
which I know, and a bunch of them are like have legitimate PhDs in biology and geology and this and that, right?
yeah.
They know how like peer review works. They know how
They do.
science works,
They do.
and they
That's
have
such a great
no
point.
interest in doing it. And like Michael B, going back to Behe specifically, people have asked him, like, and I asked him this, like, for one of his books. It was specifically his second one that I asked him, Darwin Devolves. It's like, this was not peer reviewed. Like, did anybody like review this prior to publication? And his answer was, oh, it was reviewed in the journal Science. It was reviewed by so and so. No, 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 no. That's a critical review. That's a book review.
Yeah,
That's not
yeah.
peer review. And
Yes.
Michael Behe, you know the difference.
Right.
Like, don't tell
Absolutely.
me that, oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, so and so reviewed it in this
And how dare,
magazine.
and
Like,
it's so dishonest when he says those things, because all of those people say it's terrible. So
yeah,
he'll cite them reviewing it as
right.
though they reviewed it positively, when really they were like, this is trash. I can't believe this actually got published. Who did this?
And then
Like,
oh, it was Discovery Institute. That explains it. It was their
yeah,
in-house publisher, right?
exactly.
It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
all, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that was the other thing. It was, I tried to get, because he does try, that's the other thing that's disgusting about him, is that he tries to use all of this to sell books. And I'm like, no, you don't get
right.
to, no, I'm not going to buy your books now because you're a discredit, because he has a book for his arguments, and he has a book where he responds to his critics, and a book
Yeah.
where he talks, and so he wants you to like just keep buying another book
He
so
was
you can understand what he's talking about.
literally plugging the books in the
Yeah,
conversation with you.
yeah. And
Like,
I'm like,
just so, by the
no.
way, by the book, like, stop. So, sticking with Behe specifically. So, like, I've had Behe on this channel twice. I've seen a lot
Interesting.
of people chat with
Okay.
Behe. I had him on once to talk about specifically irreducible complexity, and had him a second time to talk about Darwin Devolves. And I've seen him talk to a lot of other people. I've seen a lot of, people kind of approach Behe. I've seen, him and Ken Miller have a lot of, videos out there that you can look at.
Sure, sure.
Your approach was completely different because basically the way I did it and the way like I've seen other people do it is basically you undermine their position by like just questioning them and saying, explain this science to me. How can I tell? Like, for me, it was just like, let's define irreducible complexity. Like, I took out, like, I had on screen, like, a PowerPoint slide and was just like, I'm going to write this as you say it. Like, we're going to get this definition. And then we're going to talk a bit. And we're going to say, oh, wait a minute, that's different from what you just said. Now let's add to the definition. And it ends up being internally contradictory. And it's kind of like, reasonably gentle of just like,
Sure,
I
sure.
like explain your position and I'm going to keep trying to find gray areas where it doesn't work. And we're going to show that it doesn't work. And like Ken Miller, there's a video that everybody can find. If you just go on YouTube and search for Ken Miller and William Dembski, the specified complexity
Sure,
Discovery
sure.
Institute guy,
Okay.
where Ken Miller, all he does is like, how would I do this experiment? Like, tell me how to test this. You're the expert. I'm just some guy who wants to test your idea. What experiment can I do? And no answer. There's no way to test it,
Nothing.
right? Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
Now, so that's kind of a way that people have done this. Your way was not that. So I'm going to pull up the video of I want to play just a couple bits
Sure,
of your
sure,
introduction, just so everybody can see. So Michael Behe talks for like 10 or 12 minutes, does his usual like Darwinism can't explain blah, 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 blah. Does his, if you've seen his spiel, you know
He
exactly
does
what
the
those,
spiel.
you know
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
what those 10 minutes were. So then we go over to Jay, and I think this is going to autoplay everybody. So chat, let me know if the sound is not working, but let's hoping this works every time. You never know.
All right, here we go. All right, so I call Michael Behe the creationist mousetrap because he leads creationists to believe they have science on their side. Unfortunately, they will end up snared in the trap, only to have their faith discouraged when they come to the realization that intelligent design is not science. So we have three concerns. One is bad arguments. Two is a fraudulent organization. And three is a thoroughly discredited scholar because, again, intelligent design is not science. So we're going to start with the argument, and I chose to focus on irreducible complexity.
Now, I just want to pause here to let everybody know that I'm going to let this play for about another minute and a half. There's a list that's going to pop up, and I want to just let past Jay run through that list just so everybody can get an idea of what we're doing here.
Because it is Michael Behe's most popular argument. It's the only unique one that you're likely to hear from other apologists, quote unquote, in the wild. And if he can't defend or demonstrate his core idea, I'm not really interested in his larger dismissals of evolutionary theory. After all, Behe's not an evolutionary biologist. He's an apologist for intelligent design, and intelligent design is not science. Furthermore, if you really look into it, they're the same thing. Intelligent design is essentially the argument that life is too complex to have evolved. It breaks down into like Dembski's, specific complexity, which is something people can read about. But the only other real pillar argument for intelligent design is, in fact, irreducible complexity. Behe laughably argues that irreducibly complex systems cannot evolve in a Darwinian fashion, and this is simply not true. By irreducible, Behe means that the system cannot function if any part is removed. This is Behe's claim to fame and the crux of his intelligent design theory, whether he'll admit it or not. And of course, intelligent design is not science. There are 10 problems with this argument. One is a misunderstanding of evolutionary processes. Two, it ignores known evolutionary mechanisms. Three, it relies on refuted examples. Four, has a lack of scientific evidence. Five, are logical flaws. Six, is a failure to meet the burden of proof. Seven, is a misapplication of the term irreducibility. Eight, is a rejection of by the scientific community. Nine are legal and educational issues, and 10 are the underlying motivationists. Literally, we are talking about creationism. As noted, many people will know that when these intelligent design proponents, like after they were told they could not teach creationism in the school, they literally did a control F, find all and replace creationism with design proponents, and somebody messed it up, and that's how we got the famous C design proponentist.
Okay. I was watching that, and when you got to that list of 10 things, and I thought what was going to happen was you were going to be like, all right, let me talk about this for a minute. Let me talk about this. And you just like, boom, boom, boom. I was like, yes. Because I feel like nobody had ever said that to Behe's face. That was the impression I got. So how did you come up with that approach? Like, just, I am going to walk in here and I am going to just dump everything that is wrong on top of him immediately. How did you come up with that?
I knew that he was going to gish gallop, and I felt really committed to the idea of a lot of times we lose the dynamics in these interactions because we're right, but they have more effective rhetoric. And I was like, this time I'm going to be right and I'm going to have more effective rhetoric. So I can Gish Gallop too. I'm just going to hit him with everything up front, and then go into it. But I also just wanted to do that sort of as a guide for the audience. Like, these are all the things that I'm going to get into. And yeah, I think it worked out. To be honest, I was just trying to keep my thoughts organized. But it did definitely help to just outline the entire case up front. And of course, I deliberately chose to make sure that almost at every slide and every transition that I had a note at every slide to end with, because intelligent design is not science. And I wanted that to be a
Smart
refrain over and over, because again, they do that, right? They effectively use repetition, as though saying something that's not true over and over and over again will suddenly make it true. But why can't we use repetition, right? So
Right.
I just really was like, I didn't want to just be right. I wanted him to feel like, no, I'm not here to be your friend. This is not going to be pretty. Yeah.
And that I think that got across, because he was I think not thrilled with the
No.
amount of objections you threw at him. And I love hearing the rationale behind that strategy, because it's the kind of thing where even if you don't come back to it, you've now said it, right?
Yeah.
It's out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly.
you've also set up this thing where at the beginning you said, okay, he's going to do X, Y, and Z. He's going to use bad logic. He's going to use this term wrong. Remember, the motivations are not scientific. You've set these things up.
Yeah.
So then he comes back, and what he says is now in the context of what you said, and everyone can go, oh, I see what he's doing there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When, one of the bullet points was misunderstanding mechanisms of evolution, which he then immediately did.
Yes.
Yeah. Not how that works.
That's the other thing is I think of him as being really Weasley. There are some of these guys where the ugliness is sort of up front. I think Behe is one of those guys who he's happy to be associated with the bullies and hang out with them. But when he is alone, or you deal with him one-on-one, he comes off as a very nice guy. Oh, I'm just a sincere, genuine Catholic, and oh, these are my sincere convictions. But like, I know who you are. I know what you're part of, and I know what your real motivations are. And I think that was the first time he had felt that way. And to be honest, he had to, because I think part of it is, at least from my perspective, when I see a lot of these debates, I often see them. I don't see them a lot with marginalized people in them. Let's put it that way. And I think I also see a lot of times they're held by debate bros. And so debate bros want to be invited back for more debates. And so they kind of have a motivation to keep things cordial. And then a lot of times it's like people will say certain things, like if you're not charitable to the other person and all this other stuff, so people will kind of make you feel bad about those things. I think for somebody like me, it's like I'm looking at the harm that the Discovery Institute does. I have a lot of trans friends. I know how racist these organizations are. You can go to Discovery Institute's page right now, and you let me know when you see a Black person. So it truly is like, no, I have no love for these people. I have no love for what they're about. And so I'm trying to, like, you're the enemy, like you're harmful to people like me and the people I care about. And so I care about something different. Like, intelligent design is secondary to me. Winning a debate is secondary to me. The arguments are secondary to me. I'm here to expose this person so people know this is a bad guy who represents a bad organization. And, when you see him, come and run. and hide your LGBTQ friends.
Yeah, I didn't come here to make friends. I didn't come here
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be able to set up another one.
Right.
I have
Yeah.
one very clear goal. I want everybody who watches this to know you're bad, your organization is bad, the whole endeavor is dishonest, it's a front for ugly right-wing politics. And like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the thesis statement.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like Behe doesn't get called on that. And I say that fully self-aware that I had
Right.
him on twice to criticize his science because that's what I wanted
That's
to
what you
do.
do. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I wanted no,
Yeah.
I am going to pin you down and we're going to spend 45 minutes on the definition of irreducible complexity because you can't explain it. Right.
Right. Right.
And that was fine. But did that accomplish what you accomplished, which is to show the underlying thing that's going on here, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that I wrestle with chatting with these people, which I continue to do because again, I think it's important that people do it because otherwise, then they just get
Look, for what it's
their way to
worth,
themselves. So someone's
for
got to
what
do
it's worth, I will say that to anybody who says we shouldn't, it didn't work out. It hasn't worked out.
it. Yeah, you can't ignore it.
It's not. We ignored them. They didn't go away. They didn't lose money. They're growing. They're fine. Look, they're excited that you're ignoring them.
Yeah.
So, in terms of how to engage and what's the right way to engage, I don't have all the answers, but we're trying. We're trying to do something different. Yeah. And I don't judge anybody for the way they do engage. I know a lot of times because there's value that my style is not for everybody. There were people who were critical of the approach I took, or people thought I took it too far. That's valid, criticism. And so, everybody's a different approach. And I think some people don't even know those things, or they don't look into those things, or maybe they feel like those things maybe aren't their strong suit. So, for me, like I said, it wasn't even all about him. Like a big part of it was like, I had to be okay with me. I had to be able to walk away from that stream and say, I'm okay with what I did. And I felt like I couldn't go back to my community in good faith if I didn't call them out for all of those things. So it was just as much about me being okay with like, oh, I have to do this so that I can feel like I didn't let him slide, So
yeah. I totally hear you. Yeah, it's such a hard balance because so I just kind of this whole long meandering months long thing with Discovery Institute going back to like March, all about like junk DNA. And I ended up debating Casey Luskin, who is another one of their PhDs. He's a geologist.
Okay.
And in that debate, he said some things that were not what they had said previously. And I called him. I was like, hey, you changed this thing you said and that thing, those are different things. And over the course of this months long back and forth, what I learned, because I had never interacted directly with Casey before. I'd emailed him years ago and he got kind of snarky with me and didn't want to talk. But over the course of this, it became clear that this man is just lying. He's just straight up lying. And I always like to start with you're not lying to my face as a starting point for these conversations.
Sounds reasonable.
Is where I like to start as an assumption.
Yeah,
but at some point,
okay.
It becomes undeniable, right? And when Michael Behe is up there saying to you, right, who I don't know if he knew your background, but one, Darwinism this, Darwinism that.
Yeah.
You don't that's not what that word means.
Right.
That is extraordinarily dishonest to be. And he said, I called him on this when we were chatting, and what he said to me, and this was this dude is not on the level moment, was he said, well, I use that term to refer to any undirected mechanism of evolution. It's okay.
but that's not what it means.
That's not what it means. That means that genetic drift is Darwinism, which is literally the opposite of Darwinism because he didn't think of that. That's not what that is. You're just lying.
I hate to say it, but even the way they use it is totally like a bait and switch, Mott and Bailey type thing because he always wants to straw man Darwin into something he really didn't say. He makes, oh well, it's all about the sufficiency of mutation. That is what? What?
Nope.
You didn't even understand where they come from. Like, what do you mean? Like, and then they use that so he can dismiss all of the other evolutionary theories. They don't have to deal with actual evolutionary theory. So he's wrong about that, but then he still uses that, like, oh well, that's not, so I've gotten rid of, so he thinks he can then dismiss all of evolutionary theory by just getting rid of his straw man Darwinism. And it's just very, it's super ass backwards. It's insane, actually.
And so the first thing you said in your opening, it's extraordinarily transparent, because if someone hears that, right, and then they go to college and they take a couple biology courses, immediately they're going to learn that what Behe said is not true.
Right.
And now what happens? Right now, oh, all that stuff was wrong. So why should I accept it?
So I wish I had started teaching sooner, because I would have had this experience, but I hadn't started teaching because it was in the summer. And I had the same kind of struggle because I'm at a Catholic institution, you know. But as I told you, I'm teaching Gen Bio 1, which, for those who don't know, that is like the very first science class you ever take. All of my students are freshmen; they're brand new to college. But Gen Bio is like for science majors. So, you know, there's like you might take a different Gen Bio course if you were a non-major, but I have majors. So they're pre-health, pre-med, pre-nursing, physical therapy, whatever it is, and of course bio. And in chapter 1, we teach them that evolution and genetics are the foundations of biology. Like, says that in headlights,
Yeah.
you know, it's like a big bullet point. It's like their whole section about it, but it's chapter 1. It's like the very first thing we want to teach them. We also teach in the book that there are a lot of things that are not science. Religion is one of the things that's not science. And it even says, like, there's, you know, many phenomena that we thought had spiritual or religious explanations, we now have plausible natural explanations for, and it gives a number of examples. And so it's very much like, this is the basics, and this is what we teach students. We teach all of them this. It's foundational. It's 101. And so it's I'm glad we got to have this conversation, but I often say we're in the jig is up era. I don't know if people remember that expression, the jig is up, but the jig is up is something that was, if you were doing a scam, a con, or something dishonest and you got caught, right, and you were gonna have to stop doing it. Now that was the sort of the old timey expression you would use. The jig is up. You've been caught. The people know you're lying. You're not gonna be able to do this anymore. And I think that that's where we're at largely with religion. That I always say, those of us that know it's not true, we really, really know it's not true. There was something great the other day from, I'm sure a lot of your audience saw the Harris versus Trump debate that they had. They did an interview. I forget what channel it was, CNN, MSNBC, one of them. They did a conversation afterwards with independent voters. And I saw just this great little clip from it. And this lady, she just says about Donald Trump, she just says, "We know you're lying. We know you're lying, and you say it anyway because it's what your followers want to hear." But I just thought that was so powerful to just say, "We know you're lying." And it's really, and I think that those of us that are in this space need to recognize we have this crazy privilege. We don't, most of y'all are fairly well educated. Even if it's not formally college or whatever, like, you have some real sophistication to you. You're able to, you know, find good sources, make heads or tails of good sources versus bad sources. You know, you seek out content. You're probably sitting at home right now. A lot of people watching sports, jerking off, playing video games. You're listening to two scientists talk about, you know, like the challenges of dealing with creationists. That's a crazy choice. Not a lot of people make them type of choices.
It's true.
And so, yeah, and then a lot of us, we deal with apologists all the time. So we deal with counter apologists all the time. But most people are not equipped to deal with those things. And so you go out in the world and you're like, oh, people still, oh yeah, I guess if you're a brand new Christian, I guess Frank Turek does sound pretty convincing, huh? Phew, what do we do about that? Oh yeah, I guess irreducible complexity. Yeah, that does sounds pretty spiffy, doesn't it? And so, I've kind of realized that we're a little bit ahead of the curve, I would like to say, in that sense. But I don't think that changes the underlying groundedness of what we're standing on. I actually think the same thing about Darwin. I always tell people this. People talk about the Darwinian revolution, da 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 da. I said the Darwinian revolution hasn't fully happened yet. We're in the middle of it. Sure, there was definitely like a leading edge, and it's the most successful theory in the history of science. So, yeah, okay, I get that. But there's still 40 to 60% of this country who doesn't even think that explains human origins, right?
Right.
So we're clearly in a phase where even though it is the most successful theory in the history of science, it's still not fully accepted. So we're somewhere in the middle of the revolution where it has not been fully adopted by the majority of the population. And I think the same thing can be said about religion. We're in a phase where those of us who have learned about how to think and how to evaluate claims and how to do those things, we're pretty sure that it's a human invention. We live in a world where most people are still religious, but we're trying to bring them up to speed as quickly as we can.
So that was excellent. I want to just like clip that little bit and just like
bottle that.
Just like throw that in front of people. Just like, look, everybody, everyone just like this right here. Like just yeah. That's such a great point about how like there's such a disconnect between the scientific community and the population as a whole when it comes to evolution, both in terms of understanding evolution and then accepting kind of the central conclusions of evolution, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of why we're here, right? Like get this out of here. There's 90 people sitting here watching us talk about this that could be doing anything else, but they're here listening to us talk about this instead. Hopefully we're making some progress of getting this stuff out there and like talking about, counter apologetics and trying to like, because it all goes together, right? All the right-wing politics, it's all one thing, right? So you can just like pull people back from that along one dimension. Then you can make progress along the other dimensions too.
I think that's a fantastic point. So somebody told me Maya's in the chat, Maya Atkinson, who does
Maya's
a
here.
Bad Science Sunday on her channel. Shout out also to Bree at Hive Side. She does a lot of science content as well. But Maya does talk a lot about this and just focusing on meeting people where they're at, finding where you can push them to the left, where you can liberalize them, where you can connect to their values. Yeah, and I think that's really true though. You find where the easy access is and then see what you can sort of tug at along the way. Yeah.
And there's something critical here that even though, so obviously the way you approach Behe and the way I approach Behe were very different. There's something really important that we both did that was exactly the same. At no point in either of our conversations were we trying to convince him or at any point thought we were going to convince him of anything, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right? Yes. He's the counterparty to the conversation, but he's not the target audience. The target audience is everybody else.
Yes.
And and it's so, we're trying to show that this idea that he says is a scientific idea is actually hollow. You're trying to show that this guy who presents himself and his organization as a scientific organization is actually lying about all of that, right? You're never going to convince him that he's a fraud and a liar and DI is misrepresenting their whole purpose, right? He's never going to believe that, or let's be honest, he knows that, but he's never going to say it, right?
Yes.
But then like the audience can be brought into that, can be shown that, and they can come around to that idea. And now we've moved the ball forward. Now we've accomplished something, right?
So I have a question for you, which is, do you have a theory of Behe? Do you have like
I have a theory of Behe.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, do you have an idea as to like, why is he like this?
So here's the thing. I have gotten way more cynical over the last 5 years. I've gotten so much more cynical about every one of these people, like
Mm, mm.
Behe and Jeanson and Rob Carter and like all the rest. I've gotten so cynical about all of this. I think you actually hit the nail on the head in your chat with Behe, because you brought up the thing with fossils from the 90s that he did. And then he got
Oh, yeah.
smacked down hard
Yes.
on that, right?
Yes. That was
Where
embarrassing
he
for
said,
him.
"Oh, there's
Yes.
no, I think it was whales, or no whale transition for this or that." And then within a
Yeah.
couple of years, we actually found like the exact
Yes.
things
Yes.
in the
Yes.
right place, both geographically and geologically. They were exactly where they should have been, right? It was beautifully confirmed predictions. And he kind of had
Yes.
to put his tail between his legs for that when he doesn't talk about that anymore, right?
Right.
And
Right.
you made the
Right.
point that you know why you talk about molecular machines? Because they don't leave fossils,
Fossils. Yeah. Yeah.
right? There's no
Yeah.
fossil
Yeah.
flagella that we
Yeah.
can look at
Yeah.
to see that
Yeah.
progression.
Yeah.
And I think that was such a window into how he operates, because like, damn, like, yeah, he knows. I think anybody affiliated with Discovery Institute, like, it's crystal clear. I mean, they were founded in the early 90s, or maybe in the late 80s, early 90s, as an explicitly like right-wing think tank. And then they kind of
Right. Right.
rebranded in the mid 90s
Yes.
to do the science
Yes.
thing. But that was
Yes.
later. Most people don't know the early history of DI.
Wow.
It was like, it wasn't funded by like the Koch brothers, but it was like that kind of thing, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And um I think like my theory of Behe is like he knows, he's, as you pointed out during your debate, he's tenured, he can do whatever he wants, and he would have to like commit a felony to get fired, basically,
Right.
right?
Right.
They can't get rid of him, so he can just do whatever he wants. And it's right in the books, pays the mortgage. And I think I think it's a grift, honestly. I really do. I think that's the case for most people who participate in this stuff. I think it is basically a grift.
Now, do you think he sees himself as a man of God, or do you think he fully is aware that that's just the branding he uses at this point?
Man, I mean, self-deception, you convince
It's
yourself of a
huge.
lot,
Yeah, you can
right?
convince
To
yourself
like,
of a lot. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you can convince yourself of something when the alternative is just cognitive dissonance, right? Like that hurts a lot. You can convince yourself of a lot to cover that up, I think.
Yeah.
But I really think that I really do think that, and not just Behe, I think Discovery Institute as a whole, I think Meyer, Wells, Dembski, this is printing money. They bring in, and like
Mm,
I talk about their
mm,
audience as Marx and how little respect
mm,
they have for their audience
mm,
in terms of just like spewing misinformation at them, but
mm.
also the lack of respect they have for the people giving them money to just like rehash the same things for decades.
But you know what? I'm starting to think that that's what it's for. Like, I even like starting at a Catholic university, like I was surprised when they broke down. Like I learned real quick. Like, all right, so you go to a major like public 4-year institution like at Penn State, Michigan State, University of Minnesota. It's like that was my background, right? So you know, grants are the deal. Everybody wants grants, but STEM is bringing in the grants, right? So it's good to be in STEM because that's where the money is. Don't worry, they're not giving us the money, but STEM brings the money in. Okay. At Seton Hall, they were like, yeah, STEM, y'all doing cool. Like y'all are bringing some dollars. We would like to keep y'all doing that. Oh, but the seminary, like I learned quickly, like the seminary is really what brings in the money by the millions. So I think, but for what? Like what millions are there to pour into seminaries to do what? Like for work on what? So
That's
I
a
do think
good
a
point.
lot of it is this cope.
Yeah.
I think
Very
it's the cope.
parallel.
A lot of it's like because a lot of it's let's talk about truth and reconciliation, science and religion. Like I think they're scrambling. I think they're willing to just throw money desperately at anybody that can tell them it's all gonna work. It's all gonna be okay. Don't worry. I got a book coming out about how Darwin loved God and really, you know, like they're looking for that. If you've got a project about the origins of the universe and how the Big Bang is actually consistent with some weird interpretation of the Bible, I'm sure they could break you off $500,000 tomorrow. Like, it's just, I think it's a cope. I think they're literally willing to throw bad money after good just to keep it going.
That I had literally never thought of that, and that parallel, that makes a lot of sense to me.
So I think that's where a lot of people like that are getting this funding from.
And it goes back to something you said earlier about just the repetition, right? You just say it enough times, even if it's not true, you just keep saying it. This is the party line. We're just going to keep saying it. I am going to pause for a second here. We got a couple super chats here. So for $2, annoying all-purpose orifice newsletters. That sounds painful.
Sounds like a great porn website.
That's just Dr. Dan, scientific masochist at large. Yeah, talking to all the creationists. Although most of them won't talk to me anymore. I've invited so many. You all have no idea. I've invited so many creationists on to talk, and just they don't want to do it. They don't want to do it.
I think that's a badge of honor, though. You know.
And then Charles Payoff $4.99. Can we get more analysis of Jay torching Behe, please? Yeah, we've been just chatting about kind of the meta context of this debate, but we man, it really was. You know what? Let's. I'm gonna give everybody a treat here. I'm gonna add the debate back to the stage, and I'm gonna go to the very end because at some point, Behe decides he has had enough because you're hammering him on the tenure thing, where you're tenured, you can lie, and the department put out this statement saying ignore that guy, right? Which is basically we can't fire you, but we would if we could. And he gets really offended. And then I just want to point out to everybody who hasn't seen this debate, just the end of the exchange as Behe is leaving. So I'm just going to take a second to scroll to this. There we go. It always autoplays. So I just gotta
no worries.
Gotta hop up here. Gonna get here. Eventually he's going to decide to leave, but I want to just compliment this because again, this is the stuff people need to hear. So I think we'll just let it go for a minute or two for here. This will get the point across. Jay, you probably remember what's coming here. Here we go, folks.
Bang theory. It was only in the 1920s and 30s that physicists thought the universe was eternal and
supernatural is not science. It's not science.
It was proposed that the universe had a beginning, and you may or may not think of it, but at the time that impressed many physicists that must have been an event.
Read between the lines that he chose this line of reasoning after he got tenure.
You can't stop from slandering me.
Okay, Jay. All right, hold on, Jay. All right, hold on, Jay. Mike's making a fair point.
He's not making a fair point. It is not slander.
Okay, but let's not talk. I don't want to talk about tenure and all that stuff because it's off topic of the science.
No. Because it's relevant that his department had to make that statement against him. Why did they do that? Michael, they did
guys.
When
I said my piece. Okay.
Yeah.
Michael, I enjoyed talking with you. Jay, if you're ever back in Pennsylvania, let me know. But I'm going to say goodbye.
I'll tell you you're a liar to your face again over lunch. Be happy to.
Thank you very much.
Consider retiring. Bye-bye. Please do us all a favor. Thank you. So,
here's the thing. You're talking about the jig is up, right?
Yeah.
More people need to call these people liars to their faces when they do things in public to try to promote science that they know is wrong.
Absolutely.
And
even ending, trying to be all friendly, they always go to that. And that's why I'm willing to be mean to nice people, because that's what they use to bring people in and to put themselves above reproach. No, you don't get to be coming up here in a fraud and then doing all this stuff and then just, I'm friendly. Oh, it's good talking to you. I'll see you later. But no, there's a little bit of backstory to that, which is I was sort of prepared for that line of attack, but I wasn't necessarily going to go there. As you can see, I didn't have a slide for that or something like that, right? Because I just was going to I have this, but I'm not even going to bring it up. I stepped away for a second because I got a ring at my doorbell, and when I was gone, I was listening, and he was telling Michael Beverly this story about how he bought into evolution, and he believed it, but because he was Catholic and that's what they were taught. But then after he became an associate professor at Lehigh, he read this book. He read a creationist book.
Yeah,
It was
Evolution: A Theory in Crisis.
Michael Denton or something
Michael
like
Denton,
that. Yeah. And then he thought that was so good, and then that led him on his whole path. So first off, like I felt like that's just his little Damascus Road story, right? I used to accept the evolutionary dogma, but then my eyes were opened, right? And also Michael Beverly has spent a good time sort of debunking the backstory of J. Warner Wallace, right? Because J. Warner Wallace is the cold case Christianity guy, the case for Christ or whatever. The guy who's like, I was a detective. I used my detective skills to show me that Jesus is real or whatever. And Michael's been able to like really like debunk his backstory. Like none of this is adding up. And so this was sort of the same thing for me. Like this story is his Damascus Road story of convenience, and that deserved to be criticized because so basically I was like, he brought it up. He went there. He decided to tell the story of I was fine with evolution until I became a tenured professor, and then I read a creationist book, and wouldn't you know, now so I was like, look, no, because it does matter. Because here's the thing, and here's the thing I would have even gone on further to say, which is here's the challenge. Find me somebody who's a creationist, who believes an intelligent design proponent or whatever in a scientific field where that's the actual research they do, and then they get tenure, and I'll shut up. Just give me one person at a regular university who does intelligent design research pre-tenure and then gets tenure. I will shut up.
They publish it. It goes through peer review. They do it for real.
Yeah, and then they get tenure.
And for all the talk about Dover, and there was a whole section in there where he was just like slandering the judge, Judge Jones, and he goes off and he, this is totally an aside, but he said, oh well, the judge, he knew which side of the whatever, like he knows, which side his bread is buttered on or whatever, right? And the funny thing is, so I was paying attention during that trial. And during that trial, William Dembski said almost the exact same thing in the opposite direction. Because as you pointed out, that was a George W. Bush appointee. He was a conservative judge. And
Right.
Dembski, like on whatever blog, it might have been on Uncommon Dissent, I think was probably where he was still writing back then, was like, oh, well, Judge Jones, I mean, it's a George Bush appointee. Like, he knows what's what. If he doesn't want to like end his career, like how he knows how to rule on this question. If he wants to like keep his career going,
they were confident.
They were confident because it was a conservative Republican judge.
Yeah,
and now it's really ironic. Now you look, in hindsight,
And
they're like, well, he
yes.
sold out. Of course, he sold out.
Now
It's like,
he
no,
was
man, you weren't saying
he
that
was
at the time.
woke. He was
Yeah.
appointed.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
You weren't
So-
saying that at the time. You were
Yeah.
saying the exact opposite thing.
And then I hit
at
him
the
with
time.
well, whose job was it? Like, whose job was it to convince him?
Yeah.
Like, you were the star witness. This was your big moment. It was
Yeah.
your job to convince him that irreducible complexity has some legs to it, and you had to admit that it doesn't. But yeah, no, I brought up the tenure thing because that's what I want people to take away from that. He has to hide behind the fact that he has tenure. You cannot do stuff like this when you're pre-tenure.
Right.
If you do, you won't get tenure. So, and the other thing, again, back to the right-wing politics. Oh, and I'm glad this came up because this is the case in so many other things. Right-wingers are the ones pushing to end tenure. What they're trying to tell everybody is you need to do this because those woke, crazy, leftist, atheist, Marxist professors are going to have jobs for life and you can't fire them.
Mhm.
In reality, most of us are doing what we're supposed to be doing, and the people actually abusing the tenure system are the fucking right-wingers.
Right. The people like Michael Behe. Yeah.
The people like Michael Behe. They're the ones abusing the tenure system.
Yep.
And they're this way with other systems. So a lot of times, if you look at, for instance, DEI initiatives where we have like anti-discrimination things and grievance you can file if somebody harasses you or whatever, you will find a lot of that stuff is it's pushed by people in privileged white guys. Oh, I was made to feel guilty about being white today. I was made to feel guilty about being a white man. Oh, there's Christian persecution. Da, 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 da. And again, it is them. That's why you have to say now that's why you have to say these protected classes, it's these marginalized groups. I would say DEI for who? For who? Because if you don't, they are the ones who are actually abusing these systems. And it's the same thing going on with tenure.
Countless examples of this moral panic of, oh, you can't say anything in class anymore, you have to you're gonna and it's always I mean, look, it's so funny that you talk about teaching. I'm right now teaching general biology. I teach general biology at Rutgers. I have like 960-ish students this semester.
Yikes.
Yeah. And like we cover everything. We do cell bio, we do genetics, we do evolution, we do we do human development. We talk about sex determination. We talk about like the evolution of altruism. We talk about like behavioral stuff. Make a point to point out that evolutionary psychology is nonsense. Like there's a whole we talk about these things that are, political. Who makes them political? I'm not making it political.
Right.
I'm not making it, I'm talking about, X and Y chromosomes and downstream, regulatory networks that lead to different developmental patterns. I'm not making that political. Teaching how science works. The people making it political are the people getting offended by what is getting taught
I'm teaching.
when people teach the science, right?
Yes.
That's and you hit spot on. This is part of this broader right-wing thing. And there was one thing I wanted to point out here that I want to go back to from just a minute ago when you talked about Behe's Road to Damascus story here. I've read that book. That book is hilariously bad.
Oh, the book that he was talking about?
It's an older book. It's an older book. So it's not going to be as sophisticated as something that Nathaniel Jeanson from Answers to Genesis. Like he's put out a couple books in the last few years that are like sophisticated. They're wrong. The science is terrible, but it's very sophisticated in terms of its presentation.
He knows at least what not to say anymore.
Theory in Crisis is not that. That is a terrible, if you have a basic understanding of biology, you will understand why everything that guy says is wrong. And it doesn't pass the sniff test for a PhD biochemist to read that and go, I never thought of any of that before.
Exactly.
That's not true, dude.
Exactly.
That is not either you're lying or you genuinely do not understand the basics of the field in which you have a PhD. It's one of those two things. That's
such a great point.
These arguments are so bad. I mean, we're talking we're talking Dwayne Gish bad. These are not good arguments. And if, in the 80s or the 90s or the 2000s, if you read that book, forget about the 2020s. If you read that book, you're like, no, none of this stuff is this is not, if you've taken any class, right?
I've seen an excerpt from it because Daniel Dennett talked about it in a TED talk where he talked about the purpose-driven life, and I love that, and I've used that in class. So there's a snippet in there where he talks about how life has purpose and it's purpose-driven and it's truth and its core principle. So it's really bad. It is really horrible.
Yeah. And the idea that somebody with a PhD, because he said this happened when he was a professor,
an associate professor,
he'd
the tenured professor
through the tenure process, is now being convinced by that.
Yes,
I personally find that very difficult to believe. If that's
totally unbelievable,
that's his story. He's sticking to it. Dr. Behe, sure, but I'm just saying, as a biologist who has read that book.
Hell to the no.
I don't know, man. Are you really not understanding this stuff to that level? Come on. Come on. I don't know.
And also, I think it's weird. So I read a lot. There's a lot of criticism out there. I read a really long blog post where his son put a thing out there, and his son was like, I don't know why he's like this either. So it's a deep thing. Whatever it is, he is deeply committed to it to the point that I think even his family's miffed.
So as we've been chatting, I've missed a whole bunch of super chats.
Yeah, there's been a couple super chats.
Run through these. So Jester, Lord of Fools for $2. The knives they leave in our backs are friendly. Yes, they are.
Facts.
Yes,
Facts.
they're friendly. They're lying to your face, but they're doing it nicely. From Isaac Traster for $4.99. Thank you. If someone lies to you repeatedly, politely, that is not them being nice. That is them thinking you're too stupid or uninformed to notice.
I love
Yes,
that.
and that is what creationists do to their audience. Nobody respects non-expert creationists less than credentialed creationists. So they know they're lying to their audience. And Jeanson has said this outright. He's just straight up said, I got my PhD, and he said the exact phrase was, use and abuse my credentials.
I think what is interesting about them too is they're in a weird place because I think most of them are clearly motivated to position themselves as men of God, right? Like that's very much like a huge part of their thing. But they actually think real men of God are stupid. They don't really want to pastor. They don't really want to deal with human concerns. They want people to see them and go, oh, they're like a holy guy, but like a holy intellectual scholar or something, right? Because they don't want to get in the muck of what real holy men do. And I think it's a very interesting thing. I'm always wondering with their personality, like, because you can't picture any of these guys in worship or like leading worship or even leading a Bible study for that matter. But apparently they're obsessed with God. So I don't know.
We got another one here. Savage Bivalve Alpinist Cobra for $4.99. There were several creationist witnesses at that trial, the Dover trial, that were lucky to not catch perjury charges. That is true. It was the members of the Board of Education that like lied about where the money came from and what they said at meetings that was actually recorded. So they said like, I never said X, and they were like, roll tape saying X.
I low-key think that there's a sort of cultural normalization of lying about religion. It's like people just it's a small sacrifice. I would say this: if someone is willing to die for Jesus, they're willing to lie for Jesus.
That makes sense. Before we move on from the trial, I've got behind me here a number of books that I recommend. So the last few books on that shelf right there are all Dover trial books. So we've got 40 Days and 40 Nights, which was fine, but that was actually, I think, an English reporter kind of like parachuted in. And a lot of that is like, wow, American rural culture is weird. So that was an interesting one. And then you've got the green one, the bluish green one is Monkey Girl. That one's really good. That was kind of almost like a courtroom drama. It was really blow by blow, including there's a fantastic chapter on Behe's testimony, which is just great. And then, but the best one is The Devil in Dover by Lori Lebo. She was a local reporter in Dover. So like she had like family all around that were like kind of tangentially involved. And that was really good because she was actually a member of the community. So that skips
I need to read those.
Yeah.
Also,
really
what's
good.
interesting is the Dover crew gets together. So like Rob, the other people on the evolution side, and like Tammy Kitzmiller and people like that, like they have reunions. Like they just had one recently, and Rob, like they meet, they get together, they get dinner, drinks, and they have like a whole Dover reunion. Yeah, I gotta get myself into one of those.
Yeah, that's really cool. So that last one, the Devil in Dover, is great because you get like real insight into like the small town politics and the conflicts between like the really not even the Christians and the non-Christians, because it's rural Pennsylvania. Almost everybody's Christian on flavor, right? Yeah. But like this very specific group that took over the school board and everybody else, and how that led to kind of a schism in the community.
It seems prophetic with what we're going through now. It literally seems like it's just all happening.
I mean, this is sorry everybody. This is you go to tangents, right? But there's a fantastic podcast. I think I've plugged this before, called Extremely American. It's an NPR podcast. Season 1 was on the militia movement. Season 2 was on Christian nationalism, focusing on that church in Moscow, Idaho. Cult, that like the real hardcore Christian nationalists who think like only the men who are heads of household get to vote, right?
Yeah, no, like, one of my close friends in Kruma, he just finished. He's a he's an assistant professor at the University of Illinois now, but he just finished his postdoc at University of Idaho. So he was there. He was there. He was telling me like, "Yo, they crazy."
And he was in Moscow. He was at the campus in Moscow.
Yes,
and they've and it's exactly what it's. Dover was very small scale because it was just the school board. But in Moscow, they're like buying up property downtown, getting people on the zoning board, getting people on this, getting people on that, right?
Yes.
And the amazing thing is they're not keeping it a secret. They're like, yeah, we're going to take over the zoning board, and then we can reject businesses we don't like.
Yeah.
Guys, you can't just say it out loud, but like they are. They get just impunity, just trying to do it, just like literally just take over a small city. Welcome to 2024. Like this is happening. It's wild.
It's craziness.
So we got a couple more here. So Apocalypse Meow. Thank you for that. A few bucks for the woke mob. Thanks for all y'all do.
Thanks for all these super chats. These are awesome.
This is good. And yes, we are in fact that we are what Ben Shapiro warned you about in terms of your woke college faculty. Here we are, folks. The big scary woke mob. And then from Mark Reed for $10, Jay was amazing, and I loved how he confronted Behe with the science. It was like Behe was not used to being actually challenged. He seemed surprised. Yes, he did.
He did.
That was not.
Y'all, I'm gonna be honest with you. I think he thought I was gonna be a lightweight. I think he thought I was gonna be some easy newbie. He don't really. He probably looked me up. I don't really see a lot out there. You know, I'm gonna just go with my normal script. I don't think he did any extra preparation. He thought this was gonna be light work. I'm nobody's light work.
And he really did. If you watch those first 10 minutes, it's just the Behe spiel. It's like he has his thing.
Yeah.
And then you came in and was like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And then he's got the nerve to complain about like, oh man, that's a lot to cover. It's like, well, dude, like whose fault is that?
But think about the claim. The claim is to upend all of evolutionary theory.
Yeah.
You think you are suggesting we should just take evolution and throw it out the window? Can you publish a paper?
Can we pause on that for a second? Because he walked right up to the line of calling himself Galileo, and you called him on it. And like he did this thing that creationists do, where it's like, well, everyone thought Galileo was wrong, and then he showed them. And like, yes, occasionally somebody will come along, heterodox way of looking at things, and it turns out that one lone dissenting voice was correct. And you know what happens when that's happened historically? They've collected data and convinced everybody.
Yeah.
You wrote, Michael Behe, you wrote Darwin's Black Box. It was published in 1996. I think it was 1996. Not one single paper from that book has been published. Not one single paper since
we're almost 30 years later.
What are we doing?
What are we doing?
If you're Galileo, like get up to that on that tower and start dropping things.
And
right?
usually, again, when that happens, it's the person is being far more scientific than what is the norm of the day, right? Galileo was making observations nobody else was making. Darwin was collecting specimens and traveling around the world, seeing islands nobody had been to, right? Like, so they're doing something more scientific that leads to, the revolution. It's not they're sitting at home, drinking a beer and theorizing. The other thing is, so he likes to go to this ether thing because a big part of it is he needs to expand the definition of science, because they never talk about who the intelligent designer is. They never talk about what the source of all this irreducible complexity or any of that. So he literally wants to expand the definition of science. I've heard him admit this on a podcast. I listen to the podcast and interviews he does, and he's literally said that I would expand it to include certain things which some people have traditionally considered theology. So he literally said, I would expand science until it just theology was just included.
Okay, thanks.
And
I'm gonna go over here to science now. You do your thing. It's not that.
And so he always wants to talk about this ether theory. Like ether is a good example because it's something people used to think was a substance. And my point is just that was a scientific theory. In other words, they thought the ether was a substance that existed in reality. It was a thing you could measure, right? They came up with hypothetical measurement. They believed it was a natural phenomena which could be investigated using the scientific method. So he's being totally dishonest where he wants to say that ether theory is somehow comparable to irreducible complexity, because it was something that you can't see or whatever. And it's just like, again, you're lying about the fundamental definition of what is science.
And he also, when he's talking in that whole spiel, he talks about, oh, Darwin, he didn't really have data. He was just looking around, coming up with ideas. Like, okay, so you have not read Origin of Species, clearly, because
no.
if you read Origin of Species, and I recommend everybody who's interested in evolution, read Origin of Species. It's surprisingly readable for a book that old. Darwin was
It
an
is.
excellent writer, very clear, doesn't get bogged down in the flowery language.
So my two plugs are, Darwin is weird. I'm a person who likes Darwin. He's a weird person, and he has a lot of passion, and it comes through in his writing. Like, he uses run-on sentences, he has run-on paragraphs. He talks about being shocked. There's so much passion and emotion in there that I think people should read it, just because I think he's super interesting in the history of science. But like, yeah, it's not gonna read as like a dry manual.
Right.
It's gonna read like somebody's trying to tell you, they're taking you on an adventure.
It's an
and they
argument.
want you to,
It's structured as I'm going to convince. Here's my thing. I'm going to convince you of this.
yeah.
And like, to do that, he provides actual data. There's
Yeah.
real world examples in there that illustrate the points that he's making.
The other thing, as I want people to understand, is Darwin was an excellent scientist. He was one of the absolute best in the world at what he did. And if he was alive right now, he'd be kicking my ass in terms of publication, because he was a tremendous scientist. And when you really get into his background, like, he was like a flower guy, like plants and stuff like that. He was considered one of like the leading people in terms of describing specimens, what he had collected, what he had seen, his ability to draw things and measure. So he was literally considered one of the best scientists of his day. And his theory was informed by taking what he had collected and then going to see other people. Like, he collected bird samples. He didn't quite know what he was looking at. He would go to the leading ornithologists, and they'd help him. They'd say, oh, these are different species, or this is actually probably variation within the same species. Like, so it's totally crazy for people to act like it wasn't based on data. It was based on literally 30 years of collecting more data than anybody in the world had, and validating it externally with people who were even more expert than him in those areas. So it is a real masterpiece in the sense of building all that from the ground up. Yeah.
I want to show this comment. This, I think, gets at a really important point that I think is commonly misunderstood here. So this is from, I can never pronounce, Thylacolene Kennedy. That's insane. Jay's, this is regarding Behe underestimating you. Right?
Yeah.
It says, that's insane. Jay's a working evolutionary biologist. You think he's not going to be able to debunk your crap? But here's the thing. Most working biologists are not familiar with what creationists say. In order to effectively debate a creationist, you need to be familiar with their arguments, their backgrounds, where, as Jay illustrated, where they're coming from, like where their money's coming from, their careers. You need to be familiar with it. And there are countless examples of people like, Dwayne Gish would do this, for example, where he'd, tour the country, right? And he'd show up at some random university, be like, I'll debate any scientist about evolution. And, somebody from their biology faculty would be like, sure, I could debate this bozo on evolution. And then they get their clock cleaned because they're not prepared to argue with a creationist specifically. This is a very specific thing here. And if you're not like prepared for it, and if you're not like steeped in that specific world, you're not going to know what the arguments are, what the responses are, what the beats are, right? Whereas like, you deal with this so much. I do this. There's a bunch of people on YouTube, that are like, I could make the creationist argument better than they do, right? I know all the argument.
But there's some stuff, like I remember like a lot of Sal Cordova stuff, where they would talk about chromosome fusions and, oh God, what was his? Sal had one with his proteins, and there was another one.
Zinc finger is his favorite.
The zinc fingers, fucking zinc fingers. I would ask my colleagues about that. So y'all ever heard about zinc fingers? What y'all know about zinc fingers? They'd be like, what the talking about?
Right. There's a bunch of ways
Yeah,
to
so
do
one
the
of the
same
things the
thing.
creationists do, what they do is they go for grad level topics. They go for stuff that actually I think it's beyond that. They go for stuff you wouldn't even teach most grad students. They go for stuff that's so weird. It's like you wouldn't know about it unless you were in that particular like subfield. And nobody in
Right.
that particular subfield is connecting that to creationism. So
Yeah, they don't even know
so
it
they don't
exists.
even know that you exist. And so
Yeah.
if you have to have like what I call an extra education into not just your science, but what arguments creationists use to attack
Yeah.
your science.
It's a whole.
Yeah, and it's not going to be stuff you learned in grad school.
Exactly.
Definitely not.
Will not prepare you. Just like stuff you learned in grad school, fun fact, doesn't prepare you for a teaching career because no one teaches you how to do that either. You gotta
That's
figure
true. That is
gotta-
facts.
Just gonna throw you in there. All right. Jay, we've been going for about 80 minutes right now, and I could just sit here and chat for another 80
Yeah,
minutes.
this has
but
been fun.
But I
This has
don't want
been
to keep
fun.
you all night. So we have been, just to give everyone kind of a peek behind the curtain here. We have been working out some other topics that we are going to be talking about here, Jay's channel. We're going to be chatting more
Yeah.
over the, in the future, I hope. So what I would like to do is just give you a few minutes, just like give your final thoughts on the Behe debate, on, debating creationists, just anything kind of related to this thing. And then we'll do the wrap up stuff, and we can continue our conversations on this and other topics down the road, because this has been just a ton of fun, and I could keep going if I don't at some point end the show.
Yeah, sure. No, I'll definitely be back. Thanks so much for having me. Chat's been great. Super chats have been awesome. Thank y'all so much for coming out. My thoughts would be, the arguments are losing arguments. We can be confident the arguments are losing arguments, and there's almost always a great content creator like Dr. Dan who can help us understand why the arguments are bad arguments. I think right now for me, I'm really about pushing back against the harmful influence of these people in our society, in our politics, and in our communities. And so I would just encourage people to dig more into their backstories, figure out what organizations they come from, what are these organizations really doing, how are they funded, and then what are they about, what are they trying to do. I think the one thing I was trying to show people is not just that they're taking all this money, it's not just that they're doing this bad science, but they're a lobbying organization. They're using this, and they're gonna push forward for a world that I certainly don't want to live in. And so, yeah, I would just definitely encourage people to do that, because it does help you bring another level to the table. Because there's going to be a lot of people who say, well, okay, so some guy's got bad arguments on the internet, right? But if you're like, oh, these people are fascist, or they're racist, or they're trying to threaten homeless people with going to jail, or they're trying to create trans panic in public schools, you might bring some more people to the table who are motivated by those things, and now see that there's a lot more to this than just bad arguments.
Yeah, that's 100. I couldn't agree more. It's the bad science, as they try to present it, is just the veneer. It's the stuff underneath it that is the
absolutely
point. And that's like what trying to push back against. So those things we don't have to deal with, all the the anti-trans stuff, the racism, they're explicitly segregationist in some cases. They're explicitly anti-democratic, right? All of these things all under there. And that's the point. And dealing with the creationism, the intelligent design, that's just the surface of it. And that's people need to understand that this is not, we can talk about the science, but it's not, the issue is not about the science. It's about all that other stuff going on. Couldn't agree more. All right. Well, so Jay, what do you have coming down the road? Anything interesting other than teaching undergraduates?
No, I'm at Pocket Locker 86. I do random podcasts when I get a chance to go live. I love to. We have a offline virtual community called Gather. Definitely come hang out in our gather space if you get a chance. That's me and a bunch of other content creators hang out there with our mods and our friends. Yeah, I do a podcast every Sunday called Hot Program with my one black friend, and every other Monday I do a show on Skeptic Haven called Black Freethinkers. So definitely check those out if you get a chance.
And once again, the channel Pocket Locker 86.
Pocket Locker 86
down below.
Yeah,
Click
yeah.
on that, hit subscribe, make sure you do it. As far as my stuff right here, so I am like Jay, I am deep.
Oh yeah, let me give a quick shout out to Michael Beverly. Definitely go down in the link,
Yes.
check out the debate, and give Michael Beverly a sub and a like as well.
Thank you. Yep, that channel is linked down below, and the original debate. If you haven't watched the debate,
yeah,
check it out. You will not be disappointed. It was and it was entertaining. It was highly entertaining. Telling you, man, Behe was. People haven't done that to him, and
that's
he
great.
Needs to hear it.
I'm glad that he's uncomfortable.
So, what's been going on with me? So, I've been teaching. Semester is owning my life right now.
Yep.
All those undergraduates. So, I have a short video in the works for next week related. Funny enough, to teaching undergrads, because I saw a Nathaniel Jeanson interview where he said that undergraduate biology courses are basically like the course in God's Not Dead. And I thought, that's funny. I teach those courses. And speaking of creationists lying to their audience, right?
Yes,
like that is not like I've been in a lot of undergraduate science classrooms from both sides of those rooms. And it's not like the classroom in God's Not Dead. It's not how it goes. So I got a short thing in the works to talk about that. Beyond that, I don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing over the next few weeks, but we're
in survival mode. People got to understand the reality. We're in survival mode. We trying to get through.
I just I'll pop in. I might be live for 5 minutes next Wednesday, just to say, hey, everybody, AIG's up to some stuff. Check it out. I'll talk more about it later. We'll see. I'll get out what I can get out. I don't have
undergrads own us right now.
Undergraduates are running the show right now. Which is, you know what? Look, there's so much to say about like how much teaching just like takes over, but man, God,
it's
love
super rewarding. Yeah,
so good in front of the classroom. It's so much fun. All right, folks, this has been super fun. Thank you all for spending this time with us. I hope you all enjoyed it. One last plug: remember to subscribe to Pocket Locker 86. Check out that debate. Before you go, make sure you hit like and leave a comment here, and stay safe and healthy. And I will see you all back here next week. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for watching.